Behind the Mask, Unveiling the False Self by Sami Bsoul. She sat across from him, her hands gently clasped together, her eyes looking down at the table. She could feel his gaze, not demanding, but searching, almost as if he could see through the carefully constructed smile she had worn for years. It wasn't uncomfortable exactly, it wasn't even invasive, it was just different. The way he looked at her, so unassuming, so direct, made her feel seen in a way she hadn't allowed herself to be in a long time. "Who are you, really?" he asked, the question so quiet, yet it seemed to fill the room. The words lingered, and for a moment she could feel her heart race, a slight flutter rising in her chest. She had worked so hard to be someone she thought others wanted her to be, the person who was always in control, who had everything together, who knew what to say and when. She had perfected that image, that persona, so well that it had almost become a part of her. But in that instant, as his gaze stayed steady, she realized how much of it wasn't really her at all. He wasn't judging her. He wasn't demanding an answer. In fact, he had done something no one else had. He had given her the space to be truly herself, without fear of losing his approval. He had offered her the rare opportunity to speak her truth, to let down the walls she had built for so long, and it was in that moment she trusted him enough to do so. It felt like a favor, a gift, one she had never expected. The mask, the carefully constructed walls around her true self, had served a purpose. They had kept her safe, protected her from judgment, from the fear of rejection. But now, for the first time, she could feel the weight of those walls. They weren't providing comfort anymore. They were just heavy. In that quiet moment, she asked herself the question she had avoided for so long: is this really me? She couldn't answer right away. It wasn't as simple as just taking off the mask. She had lived with it for so long, it had become part of her routine, part of how she interacted with the world. But the question hung there, soft but persistent. Who am I, beyond the role I've been playing? We meet people every single day who are wearing masks. Some of them we don't think much about. Our interactions are brief, and it doesn't matter. But there are those we love, the people we hold dear, with whom we wish there were no masks. We don't want them to hide their true selves from us, and we hope they don't feel they need to wear a mask in front of us. The question is, do we help them take those masks off? Do we ensure them that we will always love, respect, and care for them, even if they show us their true, unmasked selves? And on the other side of the equation, when you're with the people you care about, do you feel safe enough to take off your mask? Do you believe they will understand and still accept you if you show them who you truly are, with all your flaws and imperfections? This book isn't about blaming anyone for wearing a mask. We all do it to some degree. In fact, for many of us, it's a way to navigate the complexities of life. The false self we build is often a defense mechanism, a way to protect our vulnerability and fit in. But the trouble comes when we start to believe that the mask is all we are, and we forget the truth of who we really are beneath it. In these pages, I invite you to explore that question with me, to reflect on the masks you may wear, and consider, who are you, really? This is a journey of self-awareness, of gently peeling back the layers and coming home to your true self, without judgment, but with understanding and compassion for the process. Because as you'll soon discover, the journey to uncovering the real you is not about perfection. It's about acceptance and learning to love the person you've always been, beneath all the layers. Chapter 1. The Mask We Wear. What is the false self? We've all worn a mask at some point. Maybe it's the mask of the perfect parent, always putting on a smile even when we're exhausted just to make sure our kids feel secure. We wear it because we think it's what's expected, because if we let down our guard for a moment, the illusion of having it all together might crumble. Or perhaps it's the mask of the confident colleague walking into the office with an air of self-assurance, when inside we're unsure of our abilities, questioning whether we belong. We wear this mask to blend in, to avoid the discomfort of standing out as vulnerable, unsure, or less than perfect. There's the mask of the perfect friend, always available to listen, always supportive, always the one who has the answers. But beneath it, there might be moments when we feel lonely, when we long for someone to listen to us, or when we just need a break from being the rock everyone leans on. Why do we wear these masks? What drives us to create these false selves, these personas we present to the world when deep down we know they are not who we truly are? The answer is simple yet complicated: survival. In a world that constantly demands us to be more, to perform better, to conform to societal standards of success and perfection, we often turn to these masks as a way of protecting ourselves from judgment and rejection. The false self is not necessarily a deliberate deception. Rather, it's a defense mechanism, a way to fit in and protect our vulnerability. As children, we are often taught, either directly or indirectly, that certain behaviors, appearances, or achievements are more acceptable than others. We learn to adopt these masks, consciously or unconsciously, in order to gain approval and avoid criticism. Over time, the mask becomes a habit, a way of navigating the world to ensure we feel safe, loved, and valued. But the problem arises when we start to believe the mask is who we are. When we forget the person beneath the persona, we wear the mask to be loved, to be accepted, to be seen in a way that feels secure. But what happens when we forget who we are without the mask? When the mask starts to feel so natural that we can't even remember the last time we took it off? Imagine the parent who has always been the strong one for their children. Over time, they might begin to think that their strength is their entire identity, that without it, they have nothing of value to offer. The mask has become their reality, and they are no longer able to show their children the full range of their humanity, including their vulnerability or need for support. Or think about the colleague who always projects confidence. They may begin to associate their value with how others perceive them, that if they don't appear strong, they risk losing their place or being seen as incapable. The mask becomes their safety net, but it also becomes their prison, as it locks them out of the possibility of true connection or growth. We all wear these masks, but the question is, at what cost? When we wear a mask, we are hiding parts of ourselves from the world and sometimes even from ourselves. Over time, the mask can start to feel heavy, like a role we've been forced to play, one that is disconnected from the truth of who we are. And while these masks may protect us in the short term, they prevent us from living authentically. The false self is a survival mechanism, but it isn't meant to be permanent. The longer we rely on it, the further we distance ourselves from the person we are meant to be. So, what is the false self really? It is a mask created to protect us from the world's expectations, judgments, and criticisms. It's not a lie we consciously choose to tell, but a persona we adopt out of necessity. It's the person we think we need to be in order to survive, whether it's the perfect parent, the confident colleague, the always happy friend, or even the successful individual. But here's the catch: the longer we wear these masks, the more we forget the authentic self beneath them. We start to believe the mask is all there is. We start to identify with the persona we've created, losing touch with the vulnerable, true person we are on the inside. The consequences of the false self. The false self, while protective, has its consequences. It can cause us to feel disconnected from our true desires, our true emotions, and even from those we care about the most. We begin to numb out parts of ourselves, hiding them under layers of pretense. We may start to feel like imposters in our own lives, playing roles that no longer serve us. The more we hide behind the mask, the harder it becomes to take it off. We might convince ourselves that we need to keep up the act, to keep the world believing in our perfect image. But the longer we do this, the more exhausted we become, and the more difficult it is to reconnect with our authentic selves. So ask yourself, what masks are you wearing? Are you showing the world the person you truly are? Or are you hiding behind a role you feel obligated to play? When you take off the mask, what would the world see? And more importantly, what would you see in yourself? The false self is not something we need to eliminate entirely. It serves a purpose. But the journey toward authenticity is about learning to recognize when the mask is no longer serving us and finding the courage to take it off, even if just for a moment. As you reflect on these questions, remember that this is not a judgment of who you are now, but an invitation to consider who you could be if you let yourself be seen without the mask. What would it feel like to stop pretending, to allow yourself to be loved not for the image you project, but for the person you truly are? Chapter 2: The Origins of the False Self, How It Forms. The false self is not something we are born with. It doesn't emerge overnight. It is something that forms gradually, often in response to the world around us as we try to fit in, be accepted, and be loved. But where does it begin? How do we learn to wear a mask in the first place? To understand the origins of the false self, we must look back to childhood, the time when we first begin to make sense of ourselves and our place in the world. From the moment we are born, we are dependent on the world around us for love, safety, and nurturing. But children, especially infants and toddlers, do not have the capacity to fully understand the complexities of the world they are born into. They rely heavily on their primary caregivers for emotional regulation, security, and validation. And parents, as well-meaning as they may be, can unintentionally lay the groundwork for the false self by rewarding behaviors that are deemed acceptable and suppressing those that are not. External pressures and family dynamics. As we grow, we begin to learn what is expected of us, what behaviors are rewarded, and which ones are punished. The signals are subtle at first. A child might smile to get attention, laugh to receive affection, or do something good to receive praise. Over time, these behaviors become ingrained. The child learns that to be loved or accepted, they must behave in certain ways. But here's the catch. The child is not necessarily learning to be their true self. They are learning how to be the version of themselves that will gain approval. Imagine a young child, perhaps a firstborn, who is constantly praised for being mature or responsible beyond their years. Over time, they begin to associate their value with these traits. As a result, they start to suppress the more playful, spontaneous, or carefree parts of themselves. Their true nature, the side that wants to be a child and express joy freely, gets pushed aside, replaced by a persona that is seen as responsible, perfect, and mature. This is the beginning of the false self. The child learns that only the good side is worthy of love, while the more vulnerable or playful side is ignored, shamed, or dismissed. This dynamic can become even more pronounced in family systems where love and attention are conditioned on certain behaviors. For example, in families with high expectations, whether academic, social, or emotional, children often learn to perform in ways that will earn praise. These early familial influences teach children to place external approval above their internal needs, the need for validation. As children grow, they develop a deep need for validation. Acceptance from others becomes not just a desire, but a necessity. As the child seeks approval from their caregivers, teachers, and peers, they begin to shape their identity based on how others respond to them. External validation becomes their primary source of self-worth. When a child is constantly praised for being the smart one, the athletic one, or the quiet, well-behaved one, they start to adopt these roles as part of who they are. The child's sense of self is built on what others see in them, not on an internal understanding of their own identity. Take, for example, a child who is consistently praised for being the perfect student, always getting good grades, never making trouble. Over time, the child begins to see themselves as the achiever, someone whose value is tied to performance. They may suppress other parts of their personality, the parts that want to be more playful or creative, because these are not rewarded or valued in their environment. As the child grows, the false self takes more shape. It becomes more solidified, and what was once a defense mechanism to gain approval transforms into a core aspect of their identity. The mask becomes harder to remove, and eventually they begin to forget who they were without it. Societal expectations and the pressure to conform. As we move into adolescence and adulthood, the world outside of our families becomes an even greater influence on our self-image. The societal expectations placed on us are often overwhelming. Media, culture, and social norms push us to meet certain ideals, be it in terms of beauty, success, status, or behavior. We are told that to be successful, we must be ambitious, driven, and always in control. We are told that to be liked, we must be funny, charismatic, and socially adept. We are told that to be loved, we must be caring, giving, and selfless. All these ideals are admirable, but they can also create unrealistic standards. And when we can't meet these standards, we often turn to the false self to fit in, to gain approval, or to avoid rejection. The problem with this is that over time, we lose touch with our true selves, the parts of us that are messy, imperfect, and authentic. Instead of allowing ourselves to be vulnerable and raw, we create a persona that fits the mold society has set for us. How the false self forms. The formation of the false self is a gradual process that often begins in childhood, but continues throughout adolescence and into adulthood. The false self is shaped by family dynamics, what is valued, what is expected, and how love is given. External validation, the need to be seen in a certain way by others, whether it's through praise, approval, or social acceptance. Societal pressures, the norms and ideals that tell us how we should behave, look, and achieve in order to be successful or worthy. But here's the important part: the false self is not an inherent flaw, it is a coping mechanism, a way of adapting to the world's expectations. It's a strategy for survival, a way of ensuring we are loved, accepted, and valued. And for a long time, it works. But eventually, it can start to feel like a burden, a mask that hides the real you, making you feel disconnected from your true essence. Take a moment to reflect on your own early experiences. Can you recall moments in childhood when you felt the need to be a certain way to gain love or approval? Were there aspects of yourself that you felt pressured to suppress because they weren't valued or rewarded? Now ask yourself, how much of the mask you wear today is truly yours? And how much of it has been shaped by external forces, the expectations of your family, society, or the people around you? The false self is not inherently wrong. It's often a necessary response to our environment. But it's important to begin asking the question, who would I be if I took off the mask? Chapter 3, The Survival Mechanism, Why We Create the Mask. The false self is not an accident. It doesn't simply appear out of nowhere. It's carefully constructed, honed over time to fulfill a very primal purpose: survival. From the moment we are born, we are dependent on the world around us for our very existence. We need love, safety, acceptance, and validation to thrive. But we also quickly learn that not everyone gives us what we need, and that the world can be a harsh place, especially for those who are vulnerable. We instinctively begin to protect ourselves, to shield our true selves from anything that might harm us. The false self emerges as a shield, a way to adapt to our environment and gain the validation we so desperately need. It is our survival mechanism, an emotional armor we wear to avoid the pain of rejection and the fear of not being enough. It is a defense against the uncertainty and vulnerability that come with being fully seen for who we truly are. The creation of the false self is not born out of malice or intentional deceit. It's an adaptive response to our early environments where we learn that certain behaviors are rewarded and others are punished. It's an unconscious response to external pressures that demand us to act, look, and behave a certain way to be loved and accepted. In the early stages of life, we cannot afford to be rejected, so we create the mask to fit in, to belong, and to feel secure. But over time, this mask becomes more than just a way to survive. It becomes a way to navigate the world. It becomes a tool that allows us to interact with others in a way that makes us feel safe and validated, even if it's not the whole truth of who we are. Fitting in, the need for belonging. One of the deepest human needs is the need to belong. From the moment we're born, we are wired to seek out connection, to become a part of the tribe, whether that tribe is our family, school, community, or society. We learn early on that belonging comes with certain behaviors, certain ways of speaking, acting, and even thinking. The child who wants to be accepted at school learns to fit in with their peers by adapting to their expectations, sometimes by hiding aspects of themselves they fear might make them stand out or seem different. This need for belonging can be so strong that we will often wear the mask simply to avoid the pain of being rejected or left out. The false self allows us to present a version of ourselves that is more acceptable, one that is more comfortable for others to be around. This version of us is polished, controlled, and often confident, traits that tend to earn us social acceptance and praise. As we grow older, these masks become more sophisticated. We start to wear different masks depending on the environment. We may wear one mask at work, another with our friends, and yet another with our family. Each mask is designed to help us adapt to the people and situations around us. But in doing so, we lose sight of the person we are beneath the mask, the person who is not so polished, not so controlled, and certainly not always confident. Gaining approval, the need for validation. The false self also arises as a way to gain approval. From the moment we are born, we learn that certain behaviors elicit praise and affection, while others result in criticism or rejection. Whether it's a child who learns that being good brings smiles from parents, or an employee who realizes that being the hard worker earns promotions, we begin to tailor our behavior based on what will get us the positive feedback we crave. This drive for validation is not inherently bad, it's part of the human experience. But the false self becomes problematic when we rely solely on external validation to define our worth. Over time, we begin to lose connection with our authentic selves, and instead we act based on what will garner approval from others. Our worth becomes tied to outside sources, our performance, our image, our achievements. The false self tells us that if we do not perform, we will not be loved. If we don't meet others' expectations, we are not worthy. This fear of rejection becomes the driver of the false self. We begin to act, speak, and live in ways that will ensure we fit in and gain the praise we so desperately need. But in doing so, we suppress parts of ourselves, parts that are more authentic, more real, and more vulnerable. Avoiding rejection, the fear of not being enough. At the core of the false self is the fear of rejection, the fear of not being enough. Every human being fears being unwanted or unloved, and this fear can be so overwhelming that we will do anything to avoid it. The false self is often a direct response to this fear. We create the mask as a way of protecting ourselves from rejection. It's a preemptive strike against the possibility that others might see us as inadequate or unworthy. It's easier to hide behind the mask than to risk exposing the real, vulnerable self, which we fear will not be good enough in the eyes of others. When we wear the mask, we can avoid the painful feelings of shame, guilt, or embarrassment that might arise from being judged or rejected. The false self becomes a safe haven, a place where we can hide our true selves from the scrutiny of the world. But while the mask keeps us safe in the short term, it also keeps us from forming authentic connections and living in alignment with our true nature. The mask as protection. The false self is at its core a protection mechanism, one that allows us to interact with the world without exposing our vulnerabilities. It shields us from the judgment of others and ensures that we are accepted in the groups and environments we navigate. It is, in many ways, a brilliant survival strategy. It helps us function in a world that can feel unpredictable, critical, and unforgiving. But the irony of the false self is that while it protects us from the outside world, it also keeps us isolated from our true selves. It creates a barrier between who we are and who we appear to be, and that barrier can prevent us from experiencing deep connections with others or even with our own inner truth. Think about the roles you play in your daily life. What masks do you wear to protect yourself or to gain approval? How do these masks serve you in your relationships, at work, or in social situations? Now consider this. What would it be like to take off the mask just for a moment, to step into a situation without needing to fit a particular mold, without needing to be accepted or validated by others? What would it feel like to be seen as you truly are, vulnerabilities, flaws, and all? The false self has its place. It has helped us survive and navigate the complexities of life. But at some point, the question becomes, is it still serving you, or is it keeping you from the life you're meant to live? Chapter 4: The Hidden Cost: How the False Self Affects Us. At first, the mask feels protective. It shields us from judgment, from rejection, from the harshness of a world that often demands too much. It allows us to show up in a way that feels safe, carefully curated, controlled, and acceptable. But what happens when we live behind the mask for too long? What happens when the very thing that was supposed to protect us begins to take a heavy toll on our emotional and psychological well-being? The truth is, the false self comes at a cost. The more we rely on it to navigate the world, the more disconnected we become from the person we truly are. We lose touch with our authenticity and start to feel like strangers in our own lives. The mask, which was once a survival mechanism, starts to feel less like a shield and more like a prison, the emotional toll, a life of disconnection. When we live behind the false self, we are not truly present in our lives. We are constantly performing, constantly adjusting our behavior to meet the expectations of others. We become so consumed with maintaining the mask that we forget to check in with ourselves. As a result, we begin to experience a profound sense of disconnection from others and from ourselves. We may feel like we are going through the motions, but not truly living. Our interactions with others, even the ones we love most, start to feel shallow. We engage in conversations, but they feel hollow. We share experiences, but they seem to lack depth. This disconnection is not just emotional, it's psychological. Over time, we start to question whether the relationships we have are based on who we really are, or if they are built on the personas we have created. We might wonder, do they love me for who I really am, or do they love the version of me I've been presenting? The fear of being truly seen, of revealing our vulnerabilities, creates a constant internal conflict. The psychological toll, the burden of inauthenticity. Living behind a false self also brings an unrelenting sense of inauthenticity. We begin to feel like we are acting in our own lives rather than living them. The pressure to maintain the mask, whether it's the perfect parent, the confident colleague, or the successful individual, becomes exhausting. It takes an emotional and psychological toll that we may not even fully recognize until it starts to manifest in other areas of our lives. We may experience anxiety or depression as a result of the constant pressure to be someone we're not. The disconnect between our true selves and the personas we project can lead to a sense of existential confusion. We may find ourselves wondering, who am I really? When we live inauthentically, we are constantly searching for a sense of meaning, but we are unable to find it because we are disconnected from our true selves. We might also begin to feel a deep sense of dissatisfaction with our lives. The success we achieve, the praise we receive, and the acceptance we gain no longer feel fulfilling. It all feels like a performance, a show we're putting on for others, but we're not sure if anyone is really watching or if it even matters anymore. The cost to self-esteem: who are you without the mask? At the core of the false self is the need for validation, the desire to be loved, accepted, and approved of by others. But the longer we wear the mask, the more our self-worth becomes tied to these external sources. We begin to believe that our value comes from what others think of us rather than from who we truly are. Our self-esteem becomes fragile, built on a foundation that is easily shaken. The problem with this is that external validation is fleeting. It depends on the reactions of others, and we cannot control how others perceive us. As we continue to rely on the false self for validation, we start to feel empty inside. We may receive compliments, praise, or approval, but it doesn't feel as meaningful as it once did. It's as if the recognition is directed at the mask, not the real us, and that realization creates a deep sense of emptiness. This hollow feeling is not just an emotional response, it affects our sense of self-worth. We begin to doubt our true value, questioning whether we are lovable or worthy of care without the mask. We may even develop a fear of being found out, afraid that if others saw the real us, they wouldn't love or accept us anymore. The identity crisis. Who am I without the mask? One of the most profound consequences of living behind the false self is the identity confusion it causes. When we spend so much time and energy presenting a version of ourselves that is not entirely true, we lose touch with who we really are. We begin to question, who am I really? The question of identity becomes murky. We may wonder, is this who I am, or is this just a role I've been playing? We start to feel as if we are living in a constant state of flux, never fully grounded in a sense of who we are. We may try to recall moments in our lives when we felt truly ourselves, but they seem distant, like memories of someone else. Living with this constant identity confusion can lead to a crisis of purpose. We may feel like we are on a path, but not sure where it's leading. Without a strong sense of self, everything we do feels like an improvised performance, lacking direction and meaning. We may feel lost, wondering who we really are, what we truly want, and what our true desires are. The hidden cost. Emotional exhaustion. The emotional toll of living behind the false self is also felt in the form of exhaustion. Constantly performing, constantly maintaining the mask, drains our energy and depletes our emotional reserves. We may feel burned out, not because of the demands of others, but because we are fighting an internal battle to reconcile the real us with the version of ourselves we project. This emotional exhaustion can lead to physical symptoms such as fatigue, insomnia, and chronic stress. We may also experience a loss of joy, the kind of joy that comes from living authentically, from doing things that truly resonate with our inner selves. Instead of feeling fulfilled and content, we may feel like we are going through the motions, doing what is expected of us, but not experiencing the richness of life that comes from being true to who we are. Take a moment to reflect on how the false self has affected your own life. Have you ever felt disconnected from the people around you? Do you feel like you are playing a role rather than living authentically? What about your self-esteem? How much of it is tied to the approval of others? How would it feel to disconnect your self-worth from the mask you wear and reconnect with the person beneath it? Consider this. When was the last time you felt truly yourself without needing to perform or pretend? What would it take for you to begin living in a way that feels more authentic, more aligned with who you truly are? The cost of living behind the false self is not always immediately visible, but over time, it takes a toll on our emotions, our relationships, and our sense of self. It is a quiet drain, a weight we carry unknowingly. But the good news is that once we recognize the cost, we can begin the work of unmasking and reconnecting with the person we were always meant to be. Chapter 5. The False Self in Relationships, Living for Others. We all play roles in our relationships. It's not just the mask we wear at work or in social situations or even at the family dinner table. The false self manifests most powerfully in our personal relationships, with our partners, our friends, and those we hold closest. In the desire to maintain harmony, to be loved, and to avoid conflict, we often play roles that don't reflect who we really are. We become the perfect partner, the reliable friend, or the always understanding family member. While these roles may seem harmless at first, they come at a cost, especially when it comes to intimacy and authentic connection. The more we act out these roles, the more we disconnect from the very people we are trying to connect with. When we wear the mask of the perfect partner or friend, we inadvertently build walls between ourselves and the people we love. We do so not out of malice, but out of a desire to be loved and accepted in ways we fear we won't be if we show our true selves. We may worry that revealing our vulnerabilities, our flaws, or our uncertainties will cause others to love us less, to leave us, or to think less of us. But the truth is, when we live for others, when we prioritize their approval and peace above our own authenticity, we lose the very thing we're seeking, a genuine connection, the role of the perfect partner. In romantic relationships, the false self can take on the role of the perfect partner. This is someone who always says the right things, who never makes mistakes, who is dependable, patient, and loving. The perfect partner keeps the peace, smooths over conflict, and avoids confrontation at all costs. On the surface, this seems like the ideal person to be. Who wouldn't want to be the perfect partner? After all, we are taught to be loving, supportive, and selfless. But the cost of this role is high. The more we try to be the perfect partner, the more we begin to suppress the parts of ourselves that are imperfect, those messy, vulnerable aspects that make us human. We may avoid discussing our true feelings, especially if we think they will disrupt the harmony in the relationship. We suppress our desires, our needs, and sometimes even our resentments in the name of keeping the peace. In doing so, we create an illusion of closeness, but without the emotional depth that comes with being fully seen and understood. True intimacy in a relationship is born from the ability to be vulnerable, to share not just our strengths, but also our flaws, doubts, and fears. When we wear the mask of the perfect partner, we deny ourselves and our partners the opportunity to connect on a deeper level, the role of the reliable friend. In friendships, the false self may take the shape of the reliable friend. This is the friend who is always there to listen, to offer advice, or to provide support. They are the ones others turn to in times of need, the one who seems to have everything together, the person who never says no and is always available. While being reliable is certainly a virtue, the false self often pushes us to be reliable to a fault, to the point where we lose sight of our own needs and boundaries. We agree to plans we don't want to make, help others when we feel drained, and take on responsibilities that aren't ours because we fear that saying no will result in rejection or disappointment. This role of the reliable friend keeps us busy, but not necessarily connected. We may be physically present in our friendships, but emotionally we are often on autopilot. We may avoid confronting issues in the relationship, like resentment or unmet needs, because we want to keep the peace and maintain our role as the supportive, always available friend. By overextending ourselves in this way, we fail to create the space for our true selves to be seen by our friends. True connection in friendship is about mutual vulnerability, not just being there when needed. When we hide behind the reliable friend mask, we miss the opportunity to truly connect on an emotional level, to share our joys, fears, and imperfections with one another. The cost of living for others. At the core of playing these roles, whether in romantic relationships, friendships, or family, is the fear of rejection. We wear the mask of the perfect partner, the reliable friend, or the always understanding sibling because we fear that if we show our true selves, we won't be accepted or loved. We believe that if we reveal our flaws or express our true desires, we will risk losing the approval of others. But by living for others, we end up neglecting ourselves. We become so focused on meeting the needs and expectations of those around us that we forget to nurture our own. We suppress our own emotions, needs, and desires in an effort to make others happy. This creates a sense of emptiness because we are constantly giving but not receiving what we need in return: emotional intimacy, genuine connection, and authentic love. We may find ourselves feeling resentful, exhausted, or unfulfilled, wondering why our relationships don't feel as deeply connected as we'd like them to be. Living for others, while seemingly selfless, prevents us from living authentically. We cannot truly connect with others until we allow ourselves to be fully seen, with all our imperfections, desires, and vulnerabilities. The path to true connection, vulnerability, and authenticity. The key to overcoming the false self in relationships is vulnerability. True intimacy is built on the ability to be real with others, to show not only our strengths but also our weaknesses. When we let go of the mask and stop living for others, we create the space for authentic connection. vulnerability isn't about weakness. It's about being honest, open, and authentic. It's about allowing others to see the parts of us that we've been hiding and trusting that they will still love us, still accept us, and still value us for who we really are, not just for the roles we play. When we start to live authentically, we begin to form deeper, more meaningful relationships. We no longer have to perform or keep up appearances. We can simply be, and in doing so, we create the space for the kind of connection that nourishes and sustains us. Relationships built on authenticity are not only more fulfilling, but also more resilient. They are grounded in the truth of who we are and not in the roles we feel we must play. Ask yourself, what roles do you play in your relationships? Are you the perfect partner, the reliable friend, or the always understanding sibling? How do these roles shape the way you connect with others? Do you feel like you are able to truly be yourself in your relationships? Or are you hiding behind a mask to keep the peace or gain approval? What would it be like to take off the mask, to show the real you with all your flaws, desires, and vulnerabilities? How might your relationships change if you allowed yourself to be fully seen? True connection requires vulnerability and authenticity. It's about letting go of the roles we play and allowing others to love us for who we truly are. Only then can we experience the deep, meaningful relationships we crave. Chapter 6: The Performance: How We Become What We Pretend to Be. Life is a stage, we've all heard the expression, but for many of us, it goes beyond a metaphor. For those who live behind a false self, life can feel like a series of performances, each one tailored to fit the expectations of others. We put on different masks depending on the situation, crafting an image that aligns with what others expect of us, whether in the workplace, in our relationships, or even in social settings. We play a role, performing the person we think others want us to be. The question then is, when does the performance end? When do we stop pretending and start being? The problem is that over time, we begin to lose track of where the acting ends and the being begins. The lines blur, and we start to wonder, is the person I'm pretending to be the person I've become? Crafting the image, the mask we present to the world. The false self is often created through careful curation, a deliberate crafting of how we want to be perceived. This is most apparent in the image we present to others. Think of it like an actor choosing their costume and lines. We consciously and sometimes unconsciously pick out the characteristics, behaviors, and attributes that align with the expectations of those around us. In the professional world, we may wear the mask of the ambitious worker, constantly striving to meet deadlines, overachieving, and showing up as the go-getter who is always in control. At the same time, we suppress any vulnerability, any sign of doubt, or any human imperfection that might make us seem less competent or less committed. In personal relationships, the mask might be the perfect partner, someone who always says the right things, who never gets upset, who is always understanding and caring. We might suppress our true emotions, our frustrations, and our desires, fearing that revealing these parts of ourselves will disrupt the harmony we've worked so hard to maintain. This process of image crafting is not inherently bad. We all adjust our behavior depending on the context. We all play roles to some extent. But when we begin to over-identify with these roles, when the performance becomes more important than the person beneath the mask, we lose touch with who we truly are, becoming what we pretend to be, the power of repetition. The most insidious aspect of the false self is that the more we perform a role, the more we become that role. We start out pretending to be someone who fits in, someone who gains approval, someone who is acceptable to others. But over time, the mask cements itself in place. The behaviors that were once deliberate and conscious become automatic. The perfect worker, the understanding partner, the reliable friend become who we are, not just who we act as. The performance becomes the identity. We might start out simply trying to fit in or to gain validation, but eventually we forget that we are acting at all. We no longer question the role we play or the behaviors we adopt. Who we pretend to be becomes who we believe ourselves to be. The lines between performance and reality blur, and we become strangers to our own authenticity. For example, consider someone who has always performed as the go-getter in their professional life. They work tirelessly, often at the expense of their well-being, pushing themselves to meet expectations and over-delivering. At first, it's an effort, something they do to prove themselves, but over time, the ambition becomes ingrained. They identify with the role of the ambitious worker so deeply that when asked about their identity, they no longer see themselves as just a person with ambition. They see themselves as ambition itself. The danger is that we begin to lose sight of the real person beneath the performance. The mask we wear becomes so tightly attached to us that it becomes difficult to separate who we truly are from who we've been pretending to be. The performative self. One of the challenges of living behind the false self is that we begin to navigate the world as if we are performing a carefully scripted flow of expectations. We anticipate what others want from us and respond accordingly, adjusting our behavior, our words, and our actions to fit the mold. We become so attuned to others' needs and expectations that we forget to ask ourselves what we truly want or need. In relationships, this can manifest as playing the role of the perfect partner who constantly accommodates the needs of their partner while suppressing their own desires. They might act like the supportive friend who never asks for help, or the responsible family member who always puts others first. While these behaviors may seem selfless, they often come from a place of fear of being rejected or judged if they were to reveal their true feelings or needs. Similarly, in the workplace, we might take on the role of the high achieving employee, constantly pushing ourselves to meet goals, impress supervisors, and prove our worth. We might downplay our struggles, our challenges, or our need for help, afraid that doing so will make us seem weak or incapable. The problem is, this constant performance is exhausting. We spend so much energy acting that we have little left to be. The mask we wear might allow us to navigate the world smoothly, but it also disconnects us from our true selves, the person who doesn't have to perform, who doesn't need to conform, who doesn't have to be anything other than who they are. The confusion between acting and being. As we continue to perform these roles, we begin to lose our ability to tell the difference between acting and being. We become so used to performing that it becomes second nature. We may find ourselves thinking that we are acting authentically when in reality we are just playing the part. This confusion between acting and being can create a deep sense of identity confusion. We may feel like we are living someone else's life, one dictated by external expectations, and wonder where our true selves have gone. We might feel disconnected from our own desires, dreams, and values because they have been overshadowed by the roles we have been playing for so long. In this way, we become estranged from ourselves. We live out a script that is not our own, following the lines that society, family, and peers have written for us rather than writing our own. We live for others, but in doing so, we forget how to live for ourselves. The cost of living a performance, emotional and psychological exhaustion. Living as a performative version of yourself takes a heavy toll. While it may seem like the role we play gives us security, acceptance, and approval, the underlying cost is exhaustion, both emotionally and psychologically. Constantly acting, constantly adjusting to the expectations of others drains our energy. The more we perform, the less we feel like ourselves. The emotional toll of living behind the false self also contributes to feelings of disconnection, dissatisfaction, and anxiety. We may begin to feel like imposters in our own lives, unsure of who we are outside of the roles we play. This can lead to feelings of self-doubt, frustration, and even depression. Take a moment to reflect on the roles you play in your life. What masks do you wear in your relationships, your work, or in social settings? How much of your behavior is authentically yours, and how much is driven by the desire to meet others' expectations? Have you ever felt like you are acting rather than being? Can you remember a time when you felt fully yourself, without the pressure to perform or fit into a role? What would it take to stop performing, to simply be? To let go of the mask and allow yourself to live as the person you truly are, unfiltered, unpolished, and free. Living authentically means reclaiming the power to choose who we are without relying on the script that others have written for us. It means choosing to act in alignment with our true selves rather than the roles we think we must play. Chapter 7: The Crisis of Authenticity, when the false self breaks down. There comes a moment in every person's life when the mask we've been wearing no longer fits. It begins to feel too tight, too constraining. It starts to press on our skin, making it difficult to breathe. We begin to question, who am I really beneath this mask? The false self is not a permanent solution to the complexities of life. It's a coping mechanism, a tool for survival, a way of adapting to a world that often seems too demanding, too judgmental, and too harsh. But like all tools, it has its limits. Eventually, the false self cracks, whether through burnout, a sudden emotional collapse, or a deep existential crisis. The mask begins to fall apart, revealing the true self we've been hiding underneath. What happens when the false self breaks down? What happens when we realize that the persona we've carefully crafted no longer serves us, or worse, when it feels like a burden we can no longer carry? The weight of the mask, burnout, and emotional exhaustion. For many, the false self is a source of constant effort. We wear it day after day, trying to meet the expectations of those around us, our colleagues, our families, our friends, and to perform the roles we've taken on. We become so focused on the need to be perfect in every situation that we forget to check in with ourselves. We push our own needs, desires, and emotions aside in the name of fulfilling the needs of others. At first, we thrive under the pressure. We feel that we are succeeding, that we are accomplishing something by playing the role others expect of us. But the more we invest in the performance, the more we lose ourselves in the process. And then, without warning, it hits. One day, we wake up and realize that the constant striving to maintain the mask has left us completely exhausted, emotionally, physically, and mentally. We feel drained, as if we are running on empty. The roles we've been playing no longer bring us satisfaction, and the constant pleasing of others has become an emotional drain. We feel burned out, disconnected from our own needs, and deeply unfulfilled. In these moments, the false self becomes a weight that we can no longer carry. It's a role we've been playing for so long that we've forgotten how to live without it. The demands of keeping up the appearance, of always being on, finally become too much. We are tired, not just in body but in spirit. The existential crisis, who am I without the mask? When the false self begins to break down, it often triggers an existential crisis, a deep questioning of who we are and why we're here. Without the mask to hide behind, we're left facing an overwhelming void. If the roles we've been playing were stripped away, what would be left? This is the heart of the crisis of authenticity. The persona we've so carefully constructed has provided us with a sense of purpose, a sense of identity. But when it begins to unravel, we're left asking, who am I really? If I'm not the perfect partner, the reliable friend, or the successful employee, then who am I beneath all of that? In these moments, we confront the deep disconnection between the mask we've been wearing and our true selves. We are faced with the painful realization that we've spent so much of our lives performing for others that we've neglected to understand who we truly are. The false self was a tool, a way to navigate the world, but it has now become an obstacle, and without it, we feel lost. This can trigger an intense search for meaning. We might experience a sense of disillusionment with the life we've built and the person we've become. What we once thought was fulfilling, whether it was career success, social status, or approval from others, now feels hollow. We question everything. Are these the goals I really wanted? Did I live the life I wanted, or the life others expected of me? This crisis of authenticity can feel deeply isolating. We wonder if anyone truly knows the real us, if we've spent so much time hiding behind the mask. Have we lost the ability to even recognize ourselves? The emotional breakdown, when the mask cracks open. The emotional toll of living behind the false self can lead to what feels like a breakdown. This may manifest as sudden emotional outbursts, feelings of overwhelm, or depression. In some cases, it may lead to anxiety or panic attacks as the pressure of maintaining the mask becomes unbearable. We may experience feelings of shame, shame for not measuring up, shame for feeling like we've been lying to those around us, or shame for not living up to our own expectations. This shame can lead to deep emotional pain. The emotional breakdown often comes with the painful recognition that we've been living for others instead of ourselves, and that we've neglected our own needs and desires. In the face of this breakdown, we may feel like we are on the brink of losing everything: the life we've built, the relationships we've nurtured, and even our sense of self. The mask we've worn for so long begins to feel like it's suffocating us. It no longer provides protection. Instead, it feels like a prison that keeps us from being our true selves. What happens when the false self no longer serves us? The moment the false self no longer serves us is often a turning point. It forces us to confront the question, what do I do now? When the mask begins to crack, we have the opportunity to reclaim our authenticity. We have the chance to take a deep, honest look at who we are, what we want, and what truly matters to us. But this process is not easy. It requires courage, the courage to face the parts of ourselves we've been hiding, the courage to let go of the roles we've been playing, and the courage to rebuild our lives around who we truly are. It's important to acknowledge that the breakdown of the false self is not necessarily a failure. It's an opportunity for growth and transformation. The breakdown can be the catalyst for a more authentic life, one that is lived in alignment with our true values and desires. But this process takes time. It requires patience, self-compassion, and a willingness to embrace vulnerability. It may feel like everything is falling apart, but in reality, it's an invitation to rebuild, a chance to step into a life that is more real, more meaningful, and ultimately more fulfilling. Think about a time in your life when the mask began to crack. Were there moments of burnout or emotional exhaustion that forced you to confront the false self? Did you ever experience an existential crisis where you questioned who you were without the roles you were playing? What would it look like for you to reclaim your authenticity? What steps would you need to take to let go of the false self and rebuild your life around your true identity? The false self may break down, but it's in these moments of vulnerability that we can truly find ourselves. It's in the breakdown that we are given the chance to build a life that is truly our own. Chapter 8: The Shadow, Facing the Parts We Hide. We all have parts of ourselves we keep in the dark. These parts are not inherently bad or evil, but they are often uncomfortable, unacceptable, or feared. They are the aspects of ourselves we prefer to ignore, the emotions we repress, the impulses we deny, the parts of our identity that seem unsavory or undesirable. In Jungian psychology, this hidden part of our psyche is known as the shadow, the unconscious elements of our personality that we refuse to face, accept, or integrate. But here's the thing: the shadow is not something we can simply cast aside. It is a necessary part of who we are. It represents the parts of ourselves we've learnt to suppress in order to fit into society's expectations or to maintain the false self we present to the world. The more we deny these parts, the more they control us from behind the scenes, shaping our behaviors, relationships, and emotions in subtle and sometimes destructive ways. To be whole, we must face the shadow. It is through this confrontation, this willingness to accept and integrate the shadow, that we begin to move toward a more authentic life. But this is not an easy process. It requires courage, self-compassion, and a willingness to look at the parts of ourselves we'd rather avoid. The shadow self, what we hide from ourselves. We all have parts of us that we consider unacceptable or unlovable. These might be traits or desires that don't align with the perfect image we've created for ourselves. For example, we might have feelings of anger, greed, or jealousy that we deem shameful. We might be afraid of acknowledging that we have a competitive streak or that we secretly crave attention or approval. These parts of ourselves, these shadow traits, are not inherently negative, but when they are suppressed, they become sources of inner conflict. We push them down because we believe that if others saw them, they would reject us, or worse, judge us. We fear that revealing these parts would cause us to lose the love, respect, or acceptance we've worked so hard to gain. As a result, we hide them behind the mask of the false self. The more we push these traits away, the stronger the shadow grows, lurking just beneath the surface. The more we try to control or deny it, the more it asserts its power in hidden, unconscious ways. For example, someone who believes they must be the perfect partner might suppress their own needs for independence or emotional distance. They might feel guilty for wanting time alone or for not constantly giving their partner attention. In doing so, they create an internal conflict as their true desires and feelings clash with the mask of perfection they've created. Jungian psychology and the shadow. Carl Jung, one of the pioneers of modern psychology, coined the term shadow self to describe the unconscious parts of the personality that we hide from the world and often from ourselves. According to Jung, the shadow is made up of everything we reject, repress, or fail to acknowledge. It can include everything from our fears and insecurities to our desires and impulses. Jung believed that the shadow is not inherently evil, but it contains parts of ourselves that we are afraid to face. By acknowledging the shadow, we can begin the process of integration, bringing these hidden parts of ourselves into the light and accepting them as part of who we are. However, the process of facing the shadow is not easy. It requires a willingness to confront the parts of ourselves that we'd rather keep buried. It means accepting that we are not perfect, that we have flaws, that we have negative emotions, and that we are capable of behaviors we may not be proud of. This process is often uncomfortable and challenging, but it is also deeply transformative. The importance of embracing the shadow. Why is it so important to face the shadow? The answer lies in the fact that denying the shadow only increases its power. When we refuse to acknowledge or accept the parts of ourselves we hide, they continue to operate unconsciously, often sabotaging our efforts to live authentically. Our hidden emotions and unexamined desires seep into our behavior, causing us to act in ways that are out of alignment with our true selves. For example, someone who suppresses their anger might eventually experience outbursts of frustration, even over small issues. Someone who hides their need for validation might feel resentful or empty when they don't receive the recognition they desire. These unconscious reactions are the shadow trying to break free. By embracing the shadow, we can transform these hidden traits into sources of personal power. When we accept all parts of ourselves, both the light and the dark, we gain the ability to choose how we respond to our emotions and impulses. We no longer have to be controlled by what we've hidden. Instead, we can integrate these aspects of ourselves into our conscious awareness, making us more whole and more authentic. Integrating the shadow, the path to wholeness. Facing the shadow is not a one-time event. It is an ongoing process of integration. It requires constant self-reflection, self-compassion, and a willingness to embrace the parts of ourselves we once rejected. This process involves becoming aware of the unconscious patterns that guide our behavior and actively choosing to shift them. The goal of shadow integration is to create a more whole version of ourselves, someone who is authentic, vulnerable, and fully alive. By embracing our shadow, we are not only accepting the parts of ourselves we once feared or rejected, but we are also giving ourselves permission to be imperfect. We stop hiding, stop pretending, and stop performing for others. The freedom of authenticity. Embracing the shadow ultimately leads to a sense of freedom. It is the freedom to live without the burden of maintaining a false self or playing a role that is not aligned with who we truly are. It is the freedom to express our true emotions, desires, and needs without fear of rejection or judgment. It is the freedom to be fully human, flawed, imperfect, and beautifully authentic. This freedom is not just about acceptance, it's about empowerment. When we stop running from our shadow, we stop letting it control us. We begin to own every part of ourselves, and in doing so, we reclaim our power. Take a moment to reflect on the parts of yourself that you keep hidden. What traits or emotions do you suppress because you fear they are unacceptable? What aspects of your personality do you deny in order to fit into the expectations of others? How do these hidden parts show up in your life, perhaps in ways you don't fully understand? What behaviors or patterns keep repeating themselves because of the parts of you that are still in the shadow? What would it feel like to embrace these parts, to face them head on and integrate them into your life? How might you experience more wholeness and authenticity if you allowed yourself to fully accept the person you are, including the parts you've been hiding? Facing the shadow is the path to true freedom, the freedom to live as the person you are without the mask. Chapter 9: The Awakening, the first steps toward unmasking. The first step toward authenticity is often the hardest. It begins with awareness, the realization that the mask you've been wearing no longer fits. It's a moment of awakening, a flash of clarity that strikes with the force of recognition. For so long, you may have been living behind the false self, performing roles that no longer resonate, playing out scripts that belong to someone else. But now, in this moment, you see it clearly. You have been hiding from yourself. Unmasking is not an event, it is a process, a slow, deliberate shedding of the layers we've built up over time. It starts with an honest confrontation with the parts of ourselves we've denied, and it requires both courage and compassion. This is not an easy journey, but it is a necessary one. To begin, we must first see the mask for what it is: an illusion, a defense, a coping mechanism that no longer serves its purpose. But how do we begin this process? What does it actually look like to unmask, and where do we start? The moment of awakening, becoming aware of the false self. The first step toward unmasking is awareness, the recognition that the person you've been presenting to the world may not be the person you truly are. This moment often arises from discomfort, a feeling that something is out of alignment, a growing sense that the life you're leading is not fully your own. It might happen when you feel a sudden disconnect in a relationship. Perhaps you realize you've been playing a role to please others, pretending to be someone you're not, and in doing so, losing the connection you once had. Or it might be when you feel an overwhelming sense of exhaustion, as though the act of maintaining the false self is draining your energy and spirit. These moments of discomfort are signals, signs that the mask you wear is becoming too heavy to maintain. The awareness of the false self is the first awakening. It's the realization that the roles you've been playing, the mask you've been wearing, are no longer sustainable. This is when the illusion begins to crack, and for the first time, you see the truth beneath the surface. It might be a subtle awareness at first, a feeling that you're not quite being real with yourself, or it might hit you more suddenly, like a wake-up call. Either way, it's the beginning of a journey that leads you toward a deeper connection with your true self. The decision to unmask, a courageous choice. Once you become aware of the false self, the next step is making a choice. Do you continue to hide behind the mask, or do you begin the process of unmasking? This is a crucial decision, one that requires tremendous courage. The false self has likely provided you with a sense of safety and security. It has shielded you from judgment, rejection, and the vulnerability of being truly seen. To unmask means to expose yourself to the world without the protection of the mask. It means taking the risk of being authentically you, even if that might feel uncomfortable or unsettling at first. The decision to unmask is not something you make lightly. It requires an internal commitment, a promise to yourself that you will no longer hide, no longer perform, no longer live for others' approval. It's the moment you choose to own your truth, to embrace who you really are, even if it feels messy, complicated, or imperfect. Unmasking is not about becoming someone else. It's about returning to who you truly are, beneath all the layers of conditioning, expectation, and performance. The process of unmasking, peeling back the layers. The process of unmasking is gradual. It is not an overnight transformation, but rather a slow, deliberate process of self-discovery. As you begin to peel back the layers of the false self, you may feel a mix of liberation and vulnerability. This process involves questioning everything you thought you knew about yourself. It involves examining the roles you've played and asking yourself, why have I been playing this role? Is this truly who I am? One of the first steps in this process is to acknowledge the mask, to see it clearly for what it is, an adaptation to external pressures, a way of fitting in, surviving, or gaining approval. It's important to understand that the mask is not your fault. It was created as a way to navigate the world, to protect yourself from rejection, judgment, and criticism. But now it is no longer serving you. Peeling back the layers of the false self involves self-reflection, asking difficult questions and being willing to sit with discomfort. What parts of yourself have you been hiding? What emotions, desires, or traits have you suppressed out of fear or shame? What is your true self, the self that exists beneath all the layers? As you begin to peel back these layers, you may encounter feelings of vulnerability, a sense of exposure, of being raw and unprotected. This is natural. In fact, this vulnerability is a necessary part of the process. To be truly authentic, you must be willing to embrace vulnerability, to allow yourself to be seen without the mask, and to trust that even in your rawness, you are worthy of love and acceptance. The role of self-compassion, embracing the journey. Unmasking requires self-compassion. As you begin to shed the layers of the false self, you may encounter feelings of guilt or shame for the parts of yourself you've hidden, for the roles you've played, or for the times you felt like a fraud. It's important to be gentle with yourself during this process. You've worn the mask for a reason. It was a defense mechanism, a way to survive in a world that often demands perfection and conformity. Self-compassion means recognizing that you did the best you could with the tools you had at the time. It means forgiving yourself for the times you've hidden and offering yourself kindness as you begin the process of unmasking. Unmasking is not about self-criticism or self-blame. It's about self-acceptance and self-love. As you unmask, remind yourself that you are worthy, worthy of love, worthy of connection, and worthy of being seen for who you truly are. This journey is not about perfection. It is about authenticity. It's about giving yourself permission to be imperfect, to be real, and to embrace all of who you are. The first steps toward transformation, the first steps toward unmasking may feel like small shifts, but these shifts have the power to create lasting transformation. As you become more aware of the false self, you begin to create space for the authentic self to emerge. You start to embrace vulnerability, to let go of the need for approval, and to trust that who you are beneath the mask is enough. Transformation does not happen overnight, but the awareness of the false self is the first step in a journey toward a more authentic, more fulfilled life. By choosing to unmask, you are choosing to live in alignment with your true self, no longer confined by the roles you've been playing, no longer hiding behind the mask. Think about your own journey. Have you ever had a moment of awakening when you realized that the mask you've been wearing no longer fits? What was the first sign that you were living behind a false self? How did it feel to recognize that the person you were pretending to be wasn't the person you truly were? What would it look like for you to begin the process of unmasking? What would it feel like to peel back the layers of the false self and begin to live authentically? This process begins with awareness, the recognition that the false self is no longer serving you. From there, the journey to authenticity unfolds, one step at a time. Are you ready to begin? Chapter 10, Living Unmasked. Living unmasked is not about perfection. It is about freedom. It is about embracing your truth, in all its rawness and complexity, without the need to hide behind a facade. It's about living a life that is aligned with who you truly are, where you no longer have to perform or pretend to be someone you're not. Living unmasked means choosing to be authentic, even when it feels vulnerable, even when it's uncomfortable, and even when it feels like a step into the unknown. The false self may never disappear entirely. It is a tool, a defense mechanism we've developed to navigate the complexities of life. It was created to protect us, to help us fit in, and to shield us from rejection or judgment. But once we begin the process of unmasking, the false self no longer dominates our lives. Instead of a prison, it becomes a tool, a way of expressing different parts of ourselves in a way that is more conscious and intentional. Living unmasked is about integrating the parts of yourself you once denied, embracing all aspects of who you are without shame or fear. It's about stepping into the world as your whole self without hiding behind the roles or expectations that once defined you. And when you do, you experience a freedom unlike anything you've known before, the freedom to be yourself. One of the greatest gifts of living unmasked is the freedom to be yourself, to speak your truth, to follow your desires, and to express your emotions without fear of judgment. No longer bound by the expectations of others, you can show up in the world as you are, fully alive and fully present. Living unmasked means you no longer need to conform to others' ideas of who you should be. You let go of the pressure to live up to an image or to fulfill roles that no longer resonate. Instead, you allow yourself the freedom to explore what truly matters to you and to embrace your own unique expression. This freedom comes with a profound sense of peace. When you stop pretending to be someone you're not, when you stop hiding behind a mask, you can finally relax. You no longer have to be constantly on alert, constantly performing, or constantly worried about how others perceive you. Instead, you can simply be present, authentic, and true to yourself. The peace of living authentically. Living unmasked brings with it a sense of inner peace. When we align ourselves with our true selves, we stop living in constant conflict with who we are and who we think we should be. There's no longer a gap between our internal world and our external presentation. We are no longer divided. Our actions, words, and feelings all match up, and this integrity brings a deep sense of peace. The false self is rooted in fear, fear of rejection, fear of not being enough, fear of losing love or acceptance. These fears create a constant sense of unease and disconnection. But when we live authentically, we let go of these fears. We stop relying on external validation to define our worth. Instead, we find validation from within, knowing that we are enough just as we are, that we are worthy of love and respect simply because we exist. This peace is not a fleeting feeling, it becomes a way of life. You begin to approach life with clarity and confidence, knowing that you are living in accordance with your true values and desires. You no longer feel torn between the person you are and the person you've been pretending to be. The internal peace that comes with this alignment is one of the most powerful gifts you can give yourself. The fulfillment of living unmasked. Living authentically also leads to fulfillment, the kind that comes not from external achievements or accolades, but from the satisfaction of being true to yourself. When we are unmasked, we are free to pursue the things that truly bring us joy and meaning without the pressure of meeting someone else's expectations. Fulfillment comes from within. It is found in the everyday moments of living in alignment with our true selves, whether it's pursuing a passion, engaging in meaningful relationships, or simply being present in the moment. When we no longer wear the mask, we open ourselves to the possibility of genuine connection with others because we are no longer hiding behind a persona. Unmasking does not mean that life suddenly becomes perfect or free from challenges. There will still be difficulties, there will still be moments of doubt, and there will still be times when the false self tries to reassert itself. But living unmasked means that we have the tools to handle these moments with authenticity. We no longer need to hide behind a mask to navigate difficult situations. We can face life as our true selves, knowing that we are capable of handling whatever comes our way. the false self as a tool for expression. While the false self may never completely disappear, it no longer controls us. Instead of being a source of discomfort or internal conflict, the false self becomes a tool for self expression. It is no longer a prison that keeps us trapped in roles we don't want to play. Instead, it becomes a part of who we are, a part that we can choose to use when it aligns with our authentic self. For example, in certain situations, we may still choose to adopt certain behaviors or personas, not because we are pretending to be someone else, but because we are choosing to express a part of ourselves that is appropriate for the situation. The key difference is that we are now aware of this choice. We are no longer unconsciously slipping into a mask to please others or to fit in. We are consciously choosing how to express ourselves, knowing that we are still remaining true to who we really are. The false self, when used consciously, can be a powerful tool for communication, connection, and expression. It is no longer a barrier that prevents us from living authentically. It becomes a flexible part of who we are, one that we can use as we navigate the complexities of life. Imagine a life where you no longer feel the need to wear a mask. What would it look like to live authentically, with the freedom to express yourself without fear of judgment? How would your relationships change if you stopped hiding behind a persona and allowed yourself to be fully seen? What would it feel like to embrace your true self, flaws, strengths, desires, and all? How might this shift lead to a deeper sense of peace, fulfillment, and joy in your life? Living unmasked is about embracing your truth, letting go of the need to perform, and stepping into the world as the person you are meant to be. It is not an easy journey, but it is the path to a life that is more free, more authentic, and more meaningful. Are you ready to live unmasked?